There's a morning coming. You won't see it approaching. You'll wake up like you always do, reach for the same comforts, the same routines, the same pleasures that once lit something inside you, and you'll feel nothing. Not sadness, not emptiness, just absence. The coffee tastes like water. The music sounds like noise. The touch that once sent electricity through your skin now feels like obligation. And in that moment, you'll wonder if you've lost yourself, or if you've finally found something you were never supposed to see. This isn't about depression. This isn't about burnout. This is about the day pleasure stops working, and what that collapse reveals about the architecture of your entire existence. Most people spend their whole lives chasing the next hit of pleasure without ever stopping to ask what pleasure actually is. We treat it like it's solid, like it's real, like it's something we can possess and hold on to. But pleasure is a ghost. It's a neurochemical transaction that your brain evolved to guide you toward survival. Nothing more. Food tastes good because your ancestors who enjoyed eating didn't starve. Sex feels good because organisms that found reproduction pleasurable left more offspring. Comfort feels safe because seeking shelter kept your lineage alive through ice ages and predators. Pleasure is not a gift, it's a mechanism. And the day you stop feeling it is the day that mechanism breaks down, revealing the machine underneath the experience you thought was you. The ancient hedonists understood something that modern life has completely forgotten. Epicurus, sitting in his garden 2,000 years ago, wasn't teaching people to gorge themselves on wine and excess. He was teaching them that most of what we call pleasure is actually the relief of pain. Hunger makes food pleasurable. Thirst makes water sweet. Loneliness makes connection intoxicating. Boredom makes entertainment feel necessary. Strip away the pain, and what you're left with isn't pleasure, it's neutrality. And neutrality terrifies us because we've been conditioned to believe that feeling nothing means something is wrong. But here's the twist that breaks most people. The more you pursue pleasure, the faster it degrades. This isn't a moral judgment, it's pure biology. Your brain doesn't reward you for experiencing pleasure. It rewards you for the pursuit of pleasure, the anticipation, the hunt, the gap between wanting and having. That's where the dopamine lives. Once you have the thing, once you cross the threshold from desire to possession, the system starts to recalibrate. What was once enough becomes baseline. What was once extraordinary becomes ordinary. And then you need more, a stronger dose, a bigger thrill, a newer distraction. This is the hedonic treadmill, and everyone on it swears they're about to reach the destination, right up until the day they realize they've been running in place the entire time. And if you've been resonating with this, maybe it's time to join the space where we go deeper every week. You know where the button is? So what happens when the treadmill stops? What happens when the mechanism fails and pleasure no longer responds to the inputs that used to work? Most people interpret this as personal failure. They think they're broken. They think something inside them has withered or died. But what if the opposite is true? What if the collapse of pleasure is not an ending, but an exposure? What if you're not losing your capacity to feel, but rather seeing through the illusion that feeling good was ever the point? Nietzsche wrote about this moment. He called it the death of meaning. Not the absence of meaning, but the death of the old meanings that used to hold you together. The values you inherited, the goals you adopted, the pleasures you chased because everyone around you said they mattered. When those stop working, when the lights go out on the stage you've been performing on, you're left in the dark with a question that has no comfortable answer. If pleasure doesn't satisfy, if achievement doesn't fulfill, if distraction doesn't numb, then what am I actually doing here? And more terrifying, who am I when I'm not doing anything? This is where most people panic and run back to the treadmill. They double down on the pursuit, they switch addictions. They chase new pleasures with the desperation of someone trying to restart a heart that stopped beating. And sometimes it works, for a while. The system reboots. The highs come back smaller and shorter, but enough to keep the illusion alive. But for some people, there's no going back. The curtain has been pulled. The machinery is visible. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The truth is, pleasure was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to make you survive and reproduce. Those are not the same thing. Survival wants you alive. Reproduction wants you driven. But happiness, fulfillment, meaning, Those are human constructs built on top of ancient animal wiring. And the wiring doesn't care about your existential satisfaction. It cares about whether you ate today and whether you passed on your genes. Everything else is noise. But here's the paradox. Once you stop chasing pleasure, once you stop treating it as the goal, something strange starts to happen. You begin to notice a different kind of experience. Not pleasure, not pain. Something quieter. Something that doesn't scream for attention or demand to be fed. The Greeks had a word for it, ataraxia, a kind of tranquility that exists independent of external conditions. Not the absence of feeling, but the absence of disturbance. Not numbness, but stillness. And if that's starting to make sense in a way you can't quite articulate yet, maybe you belong here with the rest of us trying to figure this out. The subscribe button isn't going anywhere, but neither are you. So let's keep going. Ataraxia is not something you achieve by doing more. It's what remains when you stop doing. When you stop performing, stop optimizing, stop chasing, stop consuming, stop building an identity out of external validation and internal chemical rewards. Most people never get there because most people never stop. They're too afraid of what the silence might reveal. But the ones who do stop, the ones who sit in the wreckage of their collapsed pleasure systems and don't run, they discover something that changes everything. The absence of pleasure is not suffering, it's clarity. This is what the Stoics were pointing at when they talked about virtue being its own reward. Not virtue in the moralistic sense, but virtue as alignment, as coherence, as doing what is true to your nature without needing a reward for doing it. The pleasure system wants you to need a reward. It wants you dependent on the next hit, the next validation, the next distraction. But coherence doesn't need anything. It simply is. And when you touch that, even for a moment, the whole game changes. But let's be honest, this is not a comfortable teaching. It doesn't sell well. It doesn't promise you shortcuts or life hacks or 3 steps to eternal bliss. What it offers is the truth. And the truth is that most of what you've been chasing is a beautiful, necessary, evolutionary lie. Pleasure is a carrot on a stick your genes use to keep you moving. And the day you stop feeling it is the day the stick breaks and you realize you were never actually hungry for the carrot. You were hungry for something else entirely. Something that doesn't have a name in the language of desire. So, what do you do with this information? How do you live in a world that runs on pleasure when pleasure has stopped working for you? This is the question that divides people. Some try to go back. They medicate, they distract, they numb, they rebuild the mechanism with whatever tools they can find. And honestly, there's no judgment in that. Survival is survival. But others take a different path. They stop trying to fix what's broken and start asking why it needed to be fixed in the first place. They stop treating the absence of pleasure as a problem and start treating it as information. What if you're not broken? What if you've just outgrown the game? What if the collapse of your pleasure system is not a malfunction but an evolution? What if your brain, your body, your entire organism is trying to tell you something that you've been too distracted to hear? That the life you've been living, the goals you've been chasing, the identity you've been performing, none of it was ever aligned with what you actually are. And now the system that kept you compliant has failed, leaving you face to face with the raw fact of your existence. This is terrifying. Because without the pleasure system to guide you, you have no map, no directions, no clear sense of what to do next. You're standing in the wreckage of your own desires with no instruction manual for how to rebuild. But here's the thing. Maybe you're not supposed to rebuild. Maybe you're supposed to let it stay broken and see what grows in the ruins. And if this is hitting differently than anything else you've heard lately, there's more where this came from. You already know what to do. The people who make it through this moment intact are the ones who stop asking how to feel good again and start asking what they're actually for. Not in some grand cosmic sense, but in the immediate, embodied sense. What is your nature? What is the thing you do that doesn't require a reward to justify doing it? What is the activity, the expression, the way of being that feels true even when it feels like nothing? Because that's what remains when pleasure dies. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but truth. And truth doesn't feel like anything. It just is. Epicurus figured this out in his garden. He realized that the highest pleasure is not sensation, but the absence of disturbance. Not ecstasy, but peace. Not accumulation, but sufficiency. He lived simply, ate simply, surrounded himself with friends and ideas, and claimed he was happier than kings. But his happiness wasn't based on feeling good. It was based on needing nothing. And needing nothing is the most radical position you can take in a world built on manufactured desire. But even Epicurus had limits. He was still working within the framework of pleasure, just refining it, purifying it, trying to extract the essence without the corruption. Nietzsche went further. He said, forget pleasure, forget happiness. Those are slave moralities designed to keep you comfortable and compliant. What you should be chasing is not what feels good, but what is great. What expands you, what breaks you open and forces you to become more than you were. And that rarely feels good. In fact, it usually feels terrible, but it's real. And reality, no matter how brutal, is better than the most beautiful lie. So, where does that leave you? On the day you stop feeling pleasure, you have a choice. You can treat it as a crisis and scramble to restore the old system. Or you can treat it as a threshold and walk through it into something you don't have a name for yet. Most people choose the crisis because the threshold is unknown. But the ones who choose the threshold, they're the ones who discover that the end of pleasure is not the end of life. It's the beginning of a different kind of existence entirely. This existence doesn't promise you highs. It doesn't promise you satisfaction or fulfillment or any of the things you were taught to want. What it offers is coherence, alignment, the feeling of being in the right place, doing the right thing, not because it rewards you, but because it's true. And truth doesn't need to feel good to be worth pursuing. It just needs to be true. You'll know you've crossed the threshold when you stop asking if you're happy and start asking if you're real. When you stop measuring your life by how much pleasure you've extracted and start measuring it by how much truth you've embodied. When you stop performing for the reward system in your brain and start living from something deeper, something that doesn't need validation or reinforcement or proof that it's working. And that place, that way of being, it doesn't have a manual. You can't optimize your way into it. You can't hack it or shortcut it or download it from someone else's experience. You have to walk into it alone, with nothing but your willingness to let the old system die and see what's on the other side. If you're still here, if you've made it this far into this conversation, you already know something that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You know that the game is rigged, that pleasure is a trap, that happiness is a marketing campaign, and that the only way out is through the collapse of everything you thought you wanted. The day you stop feeling pleasure is not the day you lose yourself. It's the day you find out what was underneath the self you were performing. And what's underneath is not always pretty. It's not always comfortable, but it's real. And real is the only thing worth being. So let it break. Let the pleasure system collapse. Let the dopamine dry up. Let the rewards stop coming. And in the silence that follows, in the space where the noise used to be, listen, because that's where the truth lives. Not in the highs or the lows, not in the chasing or the catching, but in the still, quiet space between desire and fulfillment, where you finally stop running and realize you were never going anywhere in the first place. You were always here. You just couldn't hear it over the sound of your own wanting. And maybe that's the real revelation. That the day you stop feeling pleasure is the day you stop needing it. The day you realize that what you were chasing was never the point. That the point was always the thing doing the chasing, the awareness behind the desire, the consciousness that watches the whole game unfold without ever needing to play. That's what remains when everything else falls away. Not pleasure, not pain, just presence. Just the raw fact of being alive, awake, aware, without needing it to mean anything or feel like anything or lead anywhere. Just this, just now. Just the undeniable reality that you exist, and that existence doesn't owe you anything, especially not pleasure. So, welcome to the other side. It's quieter here, less exciting, less promising, but more true. And truth in the end is the only thing that doesn't fade when the lights go out. But let's push this further, because there's another layer beneath what we've been talking about. The collapse of pleasure isn't just personal, it's cultural, it's historical. We're living through the end stage of a civilization that built itself entirely on the promise of more pleasure, more comfort, more stimulation, more options, more everything. And now we're discovering that more doesn't lead anywhere. It just leads to more. And at some point, more becomes meaningless. Think about it. Your grandparents lived in a world where pleasure was scarce and therefore precious. A piece of candy was an event. A movie was an occasion. A vacation was something you saved for all year. Pleasure had weight because it was rare. But you live in a world where pleasure is ambient. It's everywhere, all the time, competing for your attention. You have more access to more pleasurable experiences than any human in history, and you're more miserable than ever. Because pleasure without scarcity is just noise, and noise doesn't satisfy anything. It just drowns out the silence you're afraid to hear. This is what the ancient hedonists could never have predicted. They lived in a world where the pursuit of pleasure made sense because pleasure was genuinely difficult to obtain. But we live in a world where pleasure is weaponized, industrialized, optimized, and delivered directly to your dopamine receptors with algorithmic precision, and the result isn't satisfaction, it's addiction. Not to any one thing, but to the state of wanting itself. We've become a civilization of people who are addicted to desire, who can't tolerate the absence of craving, who panic the moment there's nothing left to chase. And the day you stop feeling pleasure is the day this entire system collapses inside you. It's the day you become ungovernable. Because if you don't want anything, you can't be controlled. If pleasure doesn't move you, you can't be manipulated. If the promise of more doesn't motivate you, you're free in a way that terrifies everyone, still trapped in the game. And maybe that's exactly where you need to be right now. Not trapped, but free. Free from the endless scroll. Free from the perpetual upgrade, free from the tyranny of never enough. If that sounds like the kind of freedom worth exploring, you might want to stick around here. Just saying. So let's talk about what happens after the collapse. After the pleasure stops, after the dopamine dries up, after you've sat in the ruins long enough to realize you're not going back, what comes next is not what you expect. It's not some blissful enlightenment or peaceful acceptance or serene detachment. It's something stranger and more unsettling. It's the discovery that you've been living your entire life in reaction to stimuli, and now the stimuli have stopped working, and you have no idea who you are without them. This is the crisis of the post-pleasure self. You were never just chasing pleasure. You were using pleasure to confirm that you existed, that you mattered, that your choices had weight and consequence. Every hit of dopamine was a message from the universe saying, yes, you're real. You're alive, you're doing something. But now the messages have stopped, and you're standing in the void, wondering if you were ever real at all, or just a collection of reactions pretending to be a person. This is where philosophy stops being abstract and becomes survival. Because the question is no longer theoretical, it's immediate. If I'm not the person who wants things, who am I? If I'm not the accumulation of my desires and achievements and pleasures, what remains? And the answer, the real answer that no one wants to hear, is that you might be nothing. Not in the nihilistic sense, but in the sense of no thing, no fixed identity, no solid self, just a process, just awareness happening. Just the universe looking at itself through the temporary arrangement of atoms that you call your life. And that's either the most liberating or the most terrifying realization you'll ever have. Maybe both at the same time. Because if you're not a thing, then you can't be broken. You can't fail. You can't lose yourself because there was never a self to lose. There was only ever this moment, and this moment, and this moment, each one complete and whole and requiring nothing from you except that you be present for it. But presence is the hardest work there is, because presence means feeling everything without the buffer of pleasure to soften the edges. It means experiencing your life directly, without the mediation of desire or the promise of future satisfaction. It means being here, fully here, even when here is boring or painful or empty or mundane. And most people can't do that for more than a few seconds before they reach for their phone or their substance or their distraction or their fantasy of somewhere else. The Stoics practiced this deliberately. They called it negative visualization. Imagining the loss of everything they valued, not to be morbid, but to prepare themselves for the reality that everything is temporary and nothing you possess can be kept. They were training themselves to be present with loss, with absence, with the fundamental uncertainty of existence, and in doing so, they discovered something remarkable, that when you stop needing things to be different than they are, you stop suffering. Not because life gets better, but because you stop measuring life against an imaginary standard of how it should be. This is the practice that emerges after pleasure dies. Not the pursuit of new pleasures or better pleasures or higher pleasures, but the practice of being with what is, exactly as it is, without the mental narrative that says it should be something else. And this practice doesn't feel like anything. It's not pleasurable, it's not painful, it's just presence, just awareness, just the bare fact of being alive in this body, in this moment, in this world that owes you nothing and gives you everything anyway. You're probably wondering if this is sustainable, if you can actually live like this. And the honest answer is, most people can't. Most people need the pleasure system to function. They need the rewards and the goals and the hits of satisfaction to keep them moving through their days. And there's nothing wrong with that. Evolution designed us this way for good reasons. But some people, for whatever reason, get ejected from the system. They wake up one day and the mechanism is broken and they can't go back. And those people have to find another way. If you're one of those people, if you're watching this because the old way stopped working and you're trying to figure out what comes next, then maybe this is your community. Maybe this is where the conversation continues. You know what to do. The other way is not easier, it's not more pleasant, it's not more successful by any conventional measure. What it offers is coherence, integrity, the sense that your life is aligned with something real rather than performing for something imaginary, and that alignment doesn't come from achieving anything or accumulating anything or becoming anything. It comes from subtraction, from letting go of everything that isn't essential until what remains is so simple and so true that it can't be taken from you because it was never yours to begin with. This is what the mystics were pointing at when they talked about emptiness. Not the absence of everything, but the presence of nothing. The space that contains all possible things without being attached to any of them. The awareness that watches pleasure and pain with equal interest because it knows it's not either one. It's what remains when both have passed. And it never passes because it was never born. But you can't think your way into this. You can't understand it conceptually and then apply it like a technique. You have to live it. You have to sit with the absence of pleasure until the absence becomes its own kind of presence. You have to stop asking when the good feelings will come back and start noticing what's here when they're gone. And what's here is always the same thing. Just this, just now. Just the undeniable fact of awareness, aware of itself, requiring nothing, lacking nothing, complete in every moment regardless of what that moment contains. And here's the final twist. The reason this is so hard to communicate, once you touch this, once you actually experience what it's like to exist without needing pleasure or avoiding pain, you realize that everything you were chasing was already here. The peace you wanted, the fulfillment you sought, the meaning you were searching for. It was always here, in the space between your thoughts, in the gap between your desires, in the silence underneath the noise. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy looking for something else. So, the day you stop feeling pleasure is not the day you lose access to the good life. It's the day you discover that the good life was never about feeling good. It was about being real, about being present, about being aligned with what is rather than what should be. And that kind of life doesn't promise you anything except itself, which is either everything or nothing, depending on how you look at it. And maybe that's the point, that it doesn't matter how you look at it. That the looking itself is the only thing that's real. That you, the awareness, reading these words right now, you were never the pleasure or the pain or the person or the story. You were always just the space in which all of that appears. And that space doesn't need anything to be complete because it's already complete. It's already whole. It's already everything it needs to be. So let the pleasure die. Let it collapse. Let it reveal what was always underneath. And then live from there. Live from the place that doesn't need permission or validation or reward. Live from the truth of what you are, rather than the fiction of what you want. And watch how everything changes when you stop trying to change anything. That's the message. That's the teaching. That's what the collapse of pleasure is trying to show you. Not that life is meaningless, but that meaning was never where you thought it was. It was never in the destination. It was always in the journey. And the journey is just this. Just here, just now. Just the eternal present moment that you keep missing because you're looking for something better. There is nothing better. This is it, and it's enough.